This is the man police say is behind the Idaho student murders, 28-year-old Brian Christopher Kohberger. He was arrested at his family home outside Scranton, Pennsylvania. And a white Hyundai Elantra, like this one seen near the Idaho murder scene, was seized there.
It is a little out of character, he said. I mean, this is not him. He believes he's going to be exonerated. That's what he believes.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, you've got to wonder, is Kohberger still as confident as he was before the affidavit came out now? Is he still as confident in his case? Now, no matter what the angle you're looking at it from, true crime is a game. It's a game of cat and mouse. In the criminal phase, it's a case of the cat trying to seize its chance while the mice play. When should it make its move? But of course, the moment a crime has been committed, then the tables turn and the predator becomes the mouse. The predator becomes the prey and the hunt begins. And we've just seen that play out in a 49-day investigation, a 49-day manhunt. And if you think about that hunt, it's a hunt for a person, but also a hunt for evidence, for artifacts, for a vehicle, for tips and plates. And yes, even the perpetrator's trash. And there is something faintly amusing, not necessarily funny, but something almost amusing about the perpetrator more than a month later running around with surgical gloves trying to pick up his parents' trash and pick up after them during Christmas in order not to leave an evidence trail and anyway failing at that particular effort. So in this analysis, we're going further afield. We're going out of Moscow, back to Pennsylvania, back to deal with inculpatory evidence not mentioned in the affidavit. The cops didn't just search the Kohberger's trash willy-nilly. The criminal genius himself, not knowing he was under surveillance, was sneaking around with trash bags at night, leading the cops to think, well, let's have a look at that trash. Interestingly, the trash that led to a sample bingo was likely trash Kohberger had stashed himself on a neighbor's property during a nocturnal sortie. Creepy Kohberger, perhaps dressed entirely in black, hoped to execute that mission like a professional serial killer or cat burglar. But he botched that too. And instead he was basically acting like a kind of Santa Claus, collecting all of this evidence that he was trying to get rid of, putting it in a bag, and leaving it somewhere right in front of investigators just to collect and say, okay, thank you very much. We'll take that and we'll test it. Now, I think during all of the surveillance, the obvious question would come up from those doing the surveillance, is this guy showing signs of guilty knowledge? Is he showing obvious signs of guilty knowledge? And one way to look at that is his demeanor, how furtive he is, how he tries to avoid answering certain things. But the other way is simply, what is he doing every day? And also, what is he doing late at night? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. You can also join Patreon on patreon.com/TCRS. I also want to challenge you on the question that lies at the very heart of this case. Beyond all the evidence, besides all of these statements, what need does he serve by killing? Think about that and let me know what you think in the comments. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So, when last did you put your trash in amongst your neighbors? Now, I've got to admit, I have actually done that, especially when I've done it half a dozen times in my life. I've done it maybe when I haven't taken the trash out for a while, and it's piled up, and you sort of feel a little bit embarrassed by how much is there. Of course, I've never murdered anyone, and in this situation, in these circumstances, doing something like that, especially late at night, and running around with surgical gloves, that turns all sorts of cockpit lights red in the investigators' minds. But here's a question. What was going on in Kohberger's mind? What red lights were going on in his mind? What was he concerned about? How and why did Kohberger assume he may have left DNA at the scene? Well, think about that. Number one, he knew he'd left the sheath behind. The killer knew that. He may also have cut himself, although there's no evidence thus far from the casual reading of the affidavit that that's the case. But then there were likely numerous scuffles with the victims. Probably the most vigorous and lengthy and exhausting were the final two, with Ethan and Xana. If he was scratched, he could have left DNA behind as well. Now, we'll get to the report about the garbage in a second. Almost a Dr. Kohberger was also seen cleaning his car inside and outside, not missing an inch, according to those observing him. Well, nothing too strange about that, but when last did you clean your vehicle using surgical gloves? And as it turned out, he was right to be worried. One of the two reasons the cops were on his trail was because they were sniffing around for his or his family's DNA. And it looked like he did a good job getting rid of his own DNA. One wonders at the table, inside his parents' home, at the table when he slept in bed, when he went to the bathroom, when he was doing the laundry, perhaps even opening Christmas gifts. Did mom or dad notice anything weird about Kohberger picking up after himself in a particularly precision-engineered campaign of collecting litter and collecting all that sort of thing? And perhaps he said to his mother something like, Mom, I just want to help around the house if I can. It's Christmas.
His mother then just sort of fell into the shoulder of her daughter. You couldn't hear her, but she was crying so hard. The court brings over Kleenex because at this point the whole family is very emotional, and the whole family, they're taking the Kleenex. Then he signed the extradition papers.
Now, that is another part of the narrative that is really unknown, and one that I've been dealing with and trying to deal with. I've been getting a lot of pushback from even people that know me quite well. How dare you insinuate that his parents were overprotective? How dare you insinuate that his parents were very close to him? How dare you? But the issue isn't blaming anyone. The issue is, what is the mechanism of the criminal psychology here? How do the dynamics actually play into that? And it comes to this question of, what need does he serve by killing? And I think a clue to the answer to that is getting something from his family and from his parents that he's not getting from society. Why is that, and what is that? Now, according to CNN, quote, a surveillance team assigned to Kohberger was tasked with 2 missions. And that's according to multiple law enforcement sources. The one was keep eyes on Kohberger so they could arrest him as soon as a warrant was issued. And bear in mind, several warrants were issued to search for example, phone records, right? And seize, I guess, CCTV material. And I believe you need probable cause for those as well. And then also to try to obtain an object that would yield a DNA sample from Kohberger, which could then be compared to DNA evidence found at the crime scene. And I've got an idea it's not just one sample of DNA, it's numerous, but that was something that that law enforcement knew they had they knew they had that sort of evidentiary ammunition, right? And I think Kohberger feared that. It does seem as though the cops could have arrested Kohberger even without the DNA match. I mean, as early as November 25th, less than 2 weeks after the crime, an officer had already located Kohberger's vehicle, that white Elantra, in a campus parking lot in Pullman, Washington. That's the town neighboring Moscow, just a 10-minute drive away. That aspect is covered on page 9 of the 19-page affidavit. Now, almost a month later, as late as December 23rd, law enforcement received Kohberger's phone records dating back to June 2022. That is as far as the court would allow them to deal with that, and they got that from AT&T. They managed to sync his phone movements to local CCTV of his vehicle leaving and returning to his apartment in Pullman, Washington. So do you see, they did actually have enough to nab him before Christmas. I was saying on this channel, I won't be surprised if, or I expect that there will be an arrest before Christmas. Now, Kohberger, which I think we can also nickname him Noisy Night Owl, was seen leaving his home at 4 a.m. this is in Pennsylvania, a similar time to when the murders were committed in Idaho. According to the article, in one instance prior to Kohberger's arrest, authorities observed him leaving his family home at around 4 a.m. and putting trash bags in the neighbors' garbage bins. So he didn't drive away. He didn't make really much of an effort to take it really far away. He just went right next to the neighbors, and that actually may have cost him. That you could call it laziness. At that point, agents recovered the garbage from the Kohberger's family trash bin. So at that point, so him coming out at 4 a.m., putting the trash out, that is kind of what activated them to then immediately seize those trash bags. Not only what was placed into the neighbors' bins, but I think what was already in the Kohberger's family trash bin. And who knows, maybe they got the idea from him to look through the trash. So Ali must have been very grateful to Kohberger for carefully collecting the trash, putting it somewhere where they could retrieve it without his family or Kohberger himself easily being able to detect that it had been removed. He had literally done them a favor as well by sneaking around at night, highlighting that there was a potential reward waiting for them in his not-so-secret trash run. If you think about it, they out there, they're doing kind of a stakeout. It's late at night, it's cold, there's nothing to do, and then he actually provides them with something to look at and something to act on. Thanks a lot for giving us this Christmas gift. And then this then brings us to the surgical gloves and him cleaning the vehicle. I'm sure you've read about this elsewhere, but he was actually seen multiple times outside his parents' home in Pennsylvania wearing surgical gloves. So you kind of get the idea that anything that he touched, perhaps if he was doing yard work, he didn't want anything taken there. We've also heard a report somewhere that he was seen entering a grocery store, I think a place called Giants, and he was also wearing gloves at that point. How long was he going to keep that up, and was he going to keep that up beyond winter? What is he going to do when he marked his students' papers? When he entered the classroom and left, also use gloves? Now, the recovered items, garbage items, were sent to the Idaho State Lab, and last Friday, Pennsylvania State SWAT team then moved in on the Kohberger family home. Yes, well, that was after something in the trash ultimately connected to Kohberger's DNA, in spite of all his efforts. What they did then was they broke down the door and windows in what is known as a dynamic entry. It's a tactic used in rare cases to arrest high-risk suspects. And so they obviously thought of him as high risk. Someone who had potentially the brains to trick them, to outsmart them. And although I think there's this temptation to ridicule him as a moron or as an idiot, let's face it, he did manage to stay on the run for 49 days, and he did manage to outsmart an army, I think an army of about 60 FBI agents. But did the suspect in this crime commit the perfect murder? Not even close. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.